Now, here we have two or three types of transformation. Active to passive voice is one. The next one is reported speech. That's it, two of them. So listen carefully now, no need to look at your handouts anymore. Usually in today's English, the active voice is preferred, especially if you're following American English. They discourage the passive voice completely. But although the majority of English being spoken in the world today is American, because it's a large country, the real beginning of English was in a small island which is the original mother tongue, and that is UK. In UK English, the passive voice is used very often. India was ruled by them for about 200 years. So we have continued. We learned English from them and we are continuing in the rules of UK in preference to US. But there is a conflict because all computer which we are using is Microsoft. Microsoft is not UK, it is US. So obviously they are guiding our English towards US when traditionally we are teaching UK in schools and colleges. So you have to be aware of both. You know, as students who neither belong to the US nor to the UK, you have to know both. I have heard today that because US English is not, the standard English as we call King's English and so on. US has its own version of English. Many of the schools or training centers in US are trying to give them UK English also, to make them aware. Because vocabulary is different, pronunciation is different, spelling is different, sentence construction, what we have been reading, grammar, is also different. There are so many differences between these two versions of English. So by and large, Indian English is UK. Therefore, we still use the passive form. Instead of saying that the judge passed a death sentence, very often you will hear the newspaper writing, a death sentence was passed. Who passed it? We know. Understand, judge. Nobody else can pass a death sentence except a judge. So by meaning we understand who the subject was. But the subject is not given. What is given importance is what is the most important concept in the sentence. If you say the judge passed the death sentence, in English construction, the subject gets the maximum importance. So death sentence gets little importance, judge gets more importance. You don't want that. The meaning here is death sentence is more important than the judge. The judge is only there, the person who can do it. So you change the sentence and say the death sentence was passed. Death sentence becomes subject of the sentence, it becomes very important. So that way, we are very often using the passive form. Today people have become little suspicious. Earlier it was not like that. Suppose I lost my phone, I would say, I'll blame myself. I'll say, I lost my phone. Today I don't say that. If I lose my phone, I'll say, somebody has stolen my phone. That means I'm blaming that person. So instead of saying somebody, because we don't know who has done it, if we say in passive, my phone is stolen, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm putting it in passive by saying, my phone. What is the most important word here? That we can't live without our phone. Like animals are tied up, with a rope to the pillar, all of us are tied up now. We are in a prison, and what is that prison? It's called cell. Have you heard? In the prison also, prison cell. Where is the prisoner put? In the prison cell. So where are we? We are in the mobile cell. We are also imprisoned. See how things change. So when we are using passive, certain contexts are there where the passive is very useful. That is how we use the passive, and that is why it is relevant. Many people today ask, why should we learn the passive when it is not used in any of our employment context? Most of the companies where you might get jobs might be American companies. It's possible that most of the business houses are American. They are following the best practices, including language, from America. Therefore, we have to know American English. If you go on using passive, you won't get the job, or you won't be able to keep the job. When they ask you to write or make a presentation, you use passive, they'll say, go, we don't want passive. So you must know what is the context in which passive is used, what is the context in which active is used, where active is preferred, and so on. These are all the ideas which are very relevant before you study this topic. So we still use passive. Let us not say we don't use. But Microsoft Word will underline it in green color and saying change structure or rethink, or they'll say fragment and all kinds of things. Very often they tell you things which are not really correct. As an English teacher, I know this is not correct. But a person who's writing a project report thinks, oh, Microsoft is telling me, so I should change. Very often it is not correct. Sometimes we might be better than the program which is fixed, depending on the context we have to do. For instance, if you are typing, if you want to write SEAC, like we came across many times, you write SEE, the program cannot catch. Because unless the context is very clear, it cannot catch, because both are real words in English. Certain words are there which we use often, a word like foregrounding. You won't find, it's not there in their dictionary. So many Indian words which have become a part of the Oxford Dictionary today are underlined with red, saying there is mistake in spelling. Therefore, we have to use our language also when we are studying. Now, the difference between active and passive voice is that you should be able to use the sentence in active, the sentence in passive. That is why I have called it as transformation. Whichever is useful, please use that. Active voice is what we have learnt till now. Whatever sentences where the subject does the work of the verb. Students learn English, we've been constantly hearing. So who is learning? Subject. Where the subject does the work of the verb, where the verb relates to the subject, like I have a class today, there I is the subject. That is an active voice sentence. But all sentences of the pattern SVO. Now, why did I do sentence patterns? You can understand easily. SV sentence does not have passive form. SVA sentence does not have passive form. Okay? SVC sentence does not have passive form. Unless the sentence structure is subject, verb, object, it cannot have a passive form. That means passive verbs are all transitive verbs. That much you're able to follow now. After all these terms I have used, remember these terms are not going to help you to speak English. Nobody in your whole life is going to ask, do you know what is a transitive verb? You go to a party, they might ask you, what do you think about the present situation in the world or the present situation in India? They will never ask you, please explain only using transitive verbs, or please use only active voice. Nobody is going to ever refer to any grammar in your life. That is why I gave you the example of your mother tongue, that as soon as you were born, did your parents give you a grammar book and a dictionary? But we speak our mother tongue beautifully. I have never studied my mother tongue in a school or college all my life. I studied. I was born in Hyderabad, brought up in Hyderabad, studied in Hyderabad, working in Hyderabad. I never studied my mother tongue. I can speak, I can read, I can write, I can translate from English to mother tongue to English. I have translated a big book, of Ramakrishna Math, Bengali to English, 500 pages. No difficulty. So I know my language, but I have no formal training in my language. Nobody gave me training till today. I learnt it only on my own at home with the help of my parents, not otherwise. Which means that is the natural process of learning. Can we make English into that natural process of learning without taking help from this? It's very difficult because it will take at least 5 years. The child learns an average mother tongue by about 5 years. 1 or 2 years the child makes mistakes like we are making now. That's because of limited exposure to English. So when we come to a sentence which has subject, verb and object, this sentence can be made into passive. The passive changes are like this. The object becomes the subject. The subject becomes the object, but it cannot be added immediately because the passive verb is not a transitive construction. As soon as you make the transitive verb into passive, then you are changing its function by making it intransitive. So requirement of a preposition. And the preposition which is used is by, because the work of the verb is done by the subject. Now that subject has become object. So we say by and we say subject. So these are the rules. How to construct the sentence. Verb becomes from active to passive. Subject becomes object joined with by. Object becomes subject. This is the change. Now what is the passive verb and how do we make the passive verb? I have given you the entire structure. You must put every transitive verb into that structure, then you will never make a mistake. If you do practice like this, I think you can become an English teacher easily. You don't even have to look for any other job. Jobs for English teachers are plenty. Even those who don't know very good English, when they get MA English, they can get a job. Plenty of jobs. No problem about jobs. But then you have to learn. Otherwise, you will destroy the future generations. Like your English teachers did not do a good job. Had your English teachers done a good job, not only teaching you English, but motivating you to learn English. That motivation wasn't there. Your entire focus was on the subjects, not on English. By the time you come to final year degree, engineering or otherwise, you realize suddenly English is important. Now you have to make up for about 15-16 years of English. It is not possible to make up in 16 hours 16 years of English. That is where the problem lies. So if you encourage people, if you motivate people, language learning becomes easy. So that is why I am saying that if you know 500 verbs which are transitive, you can check up in the dictionary if they are transitive or not. I told you how to do it. And then you go to this table which I gave you, write for each verb that table. It might take you a long time, it's very time consuming. Say, madam, we have no time. Everything is quick today. Nobody has time for anything. There was a great English poet, Milton. He wrote in one of the poems, "They also serve who only stand and wait." This poem is about a young man. He says, I'm not doing anything, my life is getting waste. Then this word he hears as though the word of God, saying, don't think always doing is serving God. Doing is something great. They also serve who only stand and wait. That means patience. We are in a temple where Baba tells us, Shraddha Saburi. Saburi means patience. So faith and patience. Faith in ourselves, patience that all good things will come. Such motivation is there all around us. India is a land of motivation. But why our youngsters are demotivated today, I cannot understand. I fail to understand. I am very old now, maybe that is why I can't understand. But the way we were and the way you are is different. That difference, if we overcome, then I think nobody can stop India from reaching the top. And the key for that is your, ability to help yourself. So when you look at this table, you will find that the rule for making an active verb is that you take the helping verb to be. So all tense form will use the to be. Okay? Now, then you also have the, next verb, and that is the past participle of be. So you are using the past participle. You are taking the tense form and you are taking the past participle. Finally, you take the infinitive form of the main verb. Suppose you take a sentence, we learn English. I'm telling you this sentence very often, in every example, every exercise. We learn English. We subject, learn verb, and English object. So, first thing we do is take English. So, sentence begins with English. Now, the verb is learn. Learn is present tense for plural first person. So, present tense for plural first person, we cannot use plural here because English is singular. We have to use present tense for singular, and that is. Now, the past participle of learn is learned. So we change, we use the tense form, we use the past participle form. We say English is learned. Now we have to use the preposition by. So we use by. Now the object form of we is us. Okay? Suppose instead of saying we, it becomes English is learned by us. Suppose instead of saying we, I say students learn English. So I will say English is learnt by students. Same, no change. Because we is there, we made it us, very complicated. But we have to also remember that nouns also we can do it. Now suppose it's a single one. A student learns English. No change. Because English remains the subject. English is learnt by a student. No change in the verb form. Because English guides the form we will use. Now suppose we say students are learning English. Students are learning. Are learning is the present continuous form. So if you have present continuous, then the verb also should be present continuous in the passive voice. So we will say students English is being learned. You understand? Is being is the verb form, present continuous verb form of the root verb be. In the active sentence it was are learning. Are is the verb form, helping verb form. Now you have to use the helping verb form in the full tense form. Present continuous tense is that we have to use to be verb plus ing of the main verb. So the main verb here is be, so it becomes being. The passive verb is also be, so we have to use the right form. is, was, are, were, depending on what we are using. So English is being. That is your verb form now. Learnt remains the same. It is a non-finite usage. Do you understand? We are not using it in the sense of, a finite verb. Here it is passive verb. English is not learning anything. English cannot learn. The students are learning. Therefore, it acts like that. That is the reason why we say. So we say, after 4 days, we say, students have learnt English. Perfect form. Now we have to go to the verb form, which has to be is. So you say that students, English had been learnt. You have to use had form, because we are saying students had learnt English. Suppose you say students have learnt English. So you say student English has been learnt. Why we are using been is because the rule for perfect tense is use the verb form in the past participle. The past participle of be is been. The verb have is there. Have been is the past participle form of the verb be, verb have. Therefore, we have to use. That is why this table is very important. So you say English has been learnt by students. Similarly, all verbs you can do, some do not have, like future perfect continuous, etc., do not have forms. Perfect continuous forms do not have passive. So I've put, slashes. Those passive forms don't exist. Where passive forms exist, you have to remember these 4 things which we have done. Number 1, subject becomes object. Number 2, object is added using by. Number 3, object becomes subject. Number 4, the verb, active verb changes into the corresponding tense, corresponding structure, passive verb. What is an active verb? What is a passive verb? You make a table side by side. This is a chart for active, that is a chart for passive. If you work out 10 or 20 verbs, not 500, even if you do it for 10 or 20, I'm sure your awareness will increase. You don't really need to do more. If your English is really faulty, you do few more. If your English is good, like all who spoke yesterday, I'm fine. You don't have to do too much practice. You can do a little practice. That little practice will be sufficient for all of you to improve. But do practice in a smart manner. You go on practicing in a manner which is of no use, then you don't learn. Improvement comes if you use your time perfectly. Everybody has 24 hours. Sir must be teaching time management in soft skills. How is it that some people do more in those 24 hours and some others don't do? Does it mean that somebody has 48 hours in a day? Somebody has only 12 hours in a day? By looking at the output, we feel like that. But that's not true. Where there's a will, there's a way. It is the will that is most important. Not English grammar, but the willingness to improve. So everything helps us. Suppose you do not require grammar, you only require English, then it is available. If you require only vocabulary and nothing else, it is available. If you require only pronunciation, that also is available. It is up to you to choose what do you require. In a dinner, so many things are there. Can we eat everything at once? We choose only a small amount. Otherwise, we will fall ill immediately. That ability to choose, what do I need to improve? What is it that is my requirement? Not a general requirement. I am concentrating only on the general requirement. Okay? So that much I wanted to say about active and passive voice. I hope I have been able to clear it. The only rule for this, the only most important point for this is your awareness of which verb in its active form becomes which form in the passive. Maximum mistakes are made because we do not know which tense is used in active, so we put a different tense in passive. It's a good passive sentence, but it doesn't make sense, because I explained to you each tense has a specific place on the timeline. If you look at the timeline, you will find that each of the tenses are placed somewhere. If you keep changing them, then it becomes a problem. Okay? That is direct speech and reported speech, what we also call as indirect speech. That also is there. Now, reported, as the word itself says, is that somebody is saying what he or she is not aware of, but others have said it. What we find in reports, all kinds of reports. Look at the newspaper report. They say this person has said this, that person has said that, and so on. They are not saying it. The journalist doesn't say it. Somebody else says it, the journalist is only noting. So generally, for any writing where passive voice is also used, reporting is also very common. But unlike passive voice, which is much discouraged, reporting is not discouraged at all. In fact, the direct speech is discouraged, because we don't generally put this one said and within inverted commas. We just summarize what a person has said, we summarize and put it. That becomes reported speech. So when somebody is speaking, when somebody is communicating with you, will you be able to put it across? Suppose there is a meeting going on. The boss speaks, the managers speak, everybody speaks. Then you have to write down what is called as the minutes of the meeting. Now, if you go on saying in direct speech, then you will not be able to get everything correct. It will be so difficult to read because punctuations will interfere with the meaning. So many punctuation marks. We don't. So we write in straight, such and such a person gave this idea, somebody else gave this idea. We just, paraphrase, we put it in a way which is reported speech. So maximum in our life, what we are using is reported speech. But suppose some of you want to become script writers. Television scripting, very important area today. Movie scripting, very important area today. Then you have, some of you might become short story writers, novelists. Anything is possible. We don't know who's becoming what. Therefore, we need to know that certain contexts, the exact words of the speaker also can be given. So how to give the exact words? What are the ways in which to give? And if exact words are given, how to make it reported? If report is given, how to make it the exact words, and so on. That is transformation. First, I gave you the usage in real life. Now I am giving you the grammatical point, the transformation. Why we learn transformation is because our expression becomes varied. Varied, different types. We are able to express ourselves in 10 different types, same meaning but 10 different expressions. That means we become very sophisticated in the use of language. That is what we are aiming for. That if one sentence, one meaning is there, we don't express it in that one way. Especially teachers need this. If I only explain in one way using one vocabulary and one language, all students might not understand. So the same theory, the same lesson, I have to explain in 10 different ways. What gives you this ability is variety of language. If you have a control over language, then you will find that you are able to express one thing in 10 different ways without changing the meaning, without compromising the meaning, without missing out some part of it. That is what we need to concentrate on. So now first I will tell you how a direct speech sentence looks. You can see in your handouts also, examples are there.